this is Becky Spain, your instructor for business communication. Today we will be reviewing Chapter 13 in Excellence in Business Communication. This chapter is entitled Completing Reports and Proposals, and it wraps up the sequence on developing reports and proposals. It's going to cover the 4 tasks in the completing step. Those 4 tasks are revising, producing, proofreading, and distributing. Let's jump right in with our learning objective number 1. Describe the process of revising formal reports and proposals. So the revision process is essentially the same for reports as for other business messages, although it may take considerably longer depending on the length and the complexity of the report that you've written. So evaluate your organization, your style and tone, making sure that your content is clear, it's logical, and it's reader-oriented. Then work to improve the report's readability by varying your sentence lengths, keeping paragraphs short, using lists and bullets, and adding headings and subheadings. And all of this should sound very familiar because we've talked about this in our other writing assignments. So, after assembling your report or your proposal in its final form, review it thoroughly one last time, looking for errors and inconsistencies or missing components. And don't forget to proof your visuals and make sure that they're positioned correctly. For online reports, make sure all links work as expected and all necessary files are active and available. Learning objective number 2, identify the major components of formal reports. So in addition to standalone reports and proposals, you may be asked to write in-depth content for webs or to collaborate on a wiki. So the basic principles of report writing apply to both formats, but each has some unique considerations as well. So formal reports and proposals can include a variety of features beyond the text and the visuals, and most of these elements provide additional information. A few are more decorative and add a degree of formality, but these elements can be classified in 2 ways. Prefatory elements, which are before the introduction, and supplementary elements, which are after the close. So let's start by looking at prefatory elements of the formal report. So these elements include the cover, the title fly, which is plain sheet of paper that has only the title of the report on it, although it's certainly not necessary that you include that with every report. Then there's the title page, which typically includes the report title, the name or names and titles of the writer or writers, the date of submission. This information can be put on the cover instead. There's a letter of authorization, so if you've received written authorization to prepare the report, you want to include that letter or memo in your report at this point. Next is the letter of transmittal. This is a type of cover letter that introduces the report. It can include the scope, the methods, the limitations, and the report highlights and offer follow-up information or assistance and acknowledge help received while preparing the report. Then next is the table of contents. This lists all the section headings and major subheadings to show the location of the information in the report. Then the list of illustrations, consider including if the illustrations are particularly important or if you want to call attention to them. And then finally, a synopsis, which is also sometimes called an abstract. And it's a brief overview. It's usually 1 page or less. It just summarizes the most important points in the report. It can be informative with the direct approach or descriptive with the indirect approach. But a longer report, you may want to include an executive summary rather than a synopsis. The executive summary is a fully developed mini version of the report, and it's for readers who lack the time or the motivation to read the entire document. It's kind of like the Cliff Notes. Now, it's important to note here that though these are all elements of the formal report, these are not necessarily elements that every report needs to have. So based on what kind of report that you're writing and the length of the report, these are all tools that you can use for your formal report. This chapter in particular has quite a few examples for you, starting on page 414 of what a report might look like. This slide shows your table of contents and your list of illustrations, which is on page 416. And then there's also a sample in your slides of an executive summary that you will find on page 417. But take the time to look through all the different elements of this report as we go through this information in this book. This goes all the way through to page 427, but it's very informational to help you to understand what a report might look like whenever it's all put together. I know that this is a huge amount of information to assimilate, and actually having this great example will help you do a better job of that. So let's move on to supplementary elements of formal reports. So supplementary parts of the text of the report provide information for readers who seek more details. So in general, you should place supporting material here that could be of interest to some or to all of your readers, but aren't as crucial to the main thrust of your message. So such materials would include things like the appendix, the bibliography, and the index. Once again, there are some great examples in the book of what these sections look like. An example of a reference page can be found in your book on page 427. This chapter moves fairly quickly. Learning objective number 3 is to identify the major components of formal proposals. Elements of the formal proposals parallels that the formal report that we just covered. So once again, prefatory elements would include your cover, the title fly, the title page, a copy of references to the RFP, which of course is the request for proposal. For in a proposal, because instead of having a letter of authorization that we spoke of a moment ago, a solicited proposal should include the instructions for the RFP or request for proposal. Some of the instruct you to include the RFP in your proposal, while others want you to simply identify the RFP by name and by tracking number. Once again, the synopsis or the executive summary, and then the letter of transmittal. So the proposal, if it is solicited, treat the transmittal letter as a positive message, highlighting aspects of your proposal that may give you a competitive edge. So if the proposal is unsolicited, the transmittal letter should follow the advice of the persuasive message in order to persuade the reader that you have something worthwhile to offer that justifies them sitting down and actually reading your proposal. So the supplemental elements of a formal proposal include the appendix and any resumes of key players. So we've talked about the appendices just a second ago, but for any key players for external proposals or proposals made outside your organization, resumes can convince the readers that you have the talent and the expertise to achieve the proposal's objectives. So you'll want to consider that as something that you could include if it were appropriate to the proposal that you're making. And we have some great examples of solicited proposals in our book. Examples are certainly worth your time to review. These start on page 401 and conclude on page 404. So take just a second and thumb through these proposals so that you can get an idea of how we're applying some of the concepts that we're talking about. All right, learning objective number 4, describe an effective plan for proofreading reports and proposals. So after you have assembled all the components of your report or your proposal, revised the document content for clarity and conciseness, and designed the document to ensure readability and positive impressions on your reader, you have essentially produced your documents in its final form. So proofreading the text portions of your report is essentially the same as proofreading any other business message. You check for typos, spelling errors, mistakes in punctuation. However, reports often have elements that may not be included in other messages, so don't forget to proofread your visuals thoroughly and make sure that they are positioned correctly. Once again, remember that your credibility is on the line here. So whenever possible, arrange for someone with fresh eyes to proofread the report, preferably somebody who hasn't been involved in the text so far. At this point in the process, you are so familiar with the content that your mind will fill in missing words or fix misspelled words and subconsciously compensate for other flaws that you might not see even without being aware of it. So in looking at proofreading, the other point that I would make here is to make sure that if it's something that's very detailed and required a lot of expertise, it's an area that you're not familiar with, it's a great idea to have somebody proofread it that is an expert, and then also somebody who isn't an expert, so that they can make sure that, first of all, you've not made any errors in the information that you've translated, and then also that you've written about, and then also someone who doesn't know all of the expertise to make sure that what you've written is clear enough for anyone to be able to read it and to understand it. And another thing that I will point out here in this part is that whenever you're reading a letter, proofreading, you've set aside a certain amount of time. Large reports or proposals sometimes can be a lot of information to review, and so you may think that, oh, I can get through this in, let's say you think you can get through it in 2 hours. Well, chances are you probably need to do 2 to 3 times as much, you need to schedule 2 to 3 times as much time as you think that you're going to need to actually proofread this. You're going to find that it's a huge report and that it's going to take a lot more effort and energy to review it at this detailed level. So be sure to allot 2 to 3 times as much time as you think you're going to need for proofreading the final documents. And then finally, distributing reports and proposals. So learning objective number 5, describe the decision process for distributing reports and proposals. So for physical distribution, consider spending the few extra dollars for a professional courier or package delivery service. If that will help your document stand apart from the crowd or from your competition. On the other hand, if you've prepared the document for a single person or a small group, actually hand delivering it in person can be a nice touch. Not only can you answer any immediate questions about it, but you can also promote the results in person. For electronic distribution, unless your audience specifically requests a word processor file, you need to provide the document in a PDF format. So most people are reluctant to open word processor files these days, particularly if they're from outsiders, given the vulnerability to viruses and other things. So the PDF format lets you also control how your document is displayed on the audience's computer. Sometimes, you get things lined up perfectly, but then whenever you open it up on a different computer, sometimes things can look different and get moved around, especially if they have a different kind of computer, such as if they have a Mac and you're working on a personal computer. So ensuring that your reader sees the documents as you intended is critical. So PDFing can be a good way to control that. And then if your company or your client expects you to distribute the reports through a cloud storage, a web-based content management system, a shared workspace, or some other online location, double check that you've uploaded the correct files to the correct online location. Verify the on-screen displays on your report after you've posted it too, and make sure that the graphics, the charts, and the links and all of those other elements are in place and operational. So today you're getting off with a little bit shorter lecture, and the main reason is because, as you can tell, these things are starting to parallel one another, and there are some differences based on what it is that you're reporting, but a lot of the foundational elements are the same, whether we're writing a short business message, a formal report, a proposal, and so today was more of a review and just looking at how to apply that to distributing the report or your proposals. So we will take up next week with chapter 14. We're nearing the end of completion of our time together, and next time that we get together we'll be looking at developing and delivering your business presentation. I look forward to talking to you more at that time.